Andy describes a room.
Kind of grey, 12.5 centimeters. There's a plant, the same color, and it is definitely bigger than 1 meter. Hello, and welcome to the first ever episode of Andy Casper Describes a Room. So let's just get into it. There's a plant in the corner with leaves. Well, obviously they are dark green. They're like big, and then they are like oval shaped, and then at the end they have a little point, like a kind of like a little well, it's like a little spike, but it's kind of like it dangles a little bit. It droops. It's a droopy spike. I don't think it's dangerous. And each one of the leaves is kind of similar in that way. There's a kind of spine in the middle that runs down the leaf, separating both sides, giving it's kind of like a line of symmetry for the leaf. They're kind of curved a little bit, like where the line is in the middle. It kind of is almost like a valley in the leaf, and it's sort of the two sides. Each one is kind of curved. It's not like exactly a cylinder, but it's kind of it's like almost like a kind of like if you were looking at a maggot, like from above, it's kind of that, and it's almost like two green maggots next to each other with a line in the middle, and they have like a sort of ribbing basically, where the lines are not perpendicular to the line of symmetry that runs down the middle, but they kind of go off I guess maybe they start at 90 degree, but then they kind of, or sometimes it's maybe more than 90 degrees. Sometimes it looks like it might be like 100 or 110 degrees that these lines go off, sort of like a ribbing on the leaf, and that's the same for all of the leaves on this plant. The plant has the leaves are bigger the lower down you go on the plant. I would say the stem, the main kind of like stick part of the plant, going from the bottom, where, well, I described that there's a cylindrical plant pot that's kind of made of like it looks like a wicker kind of material, so it's sort of like a wicker basket almost, and it's not totally full up to the top with mud or soil, but it's mainly full. And I would estimate that the height of the plant pot is maybe about 30 centimeters, and the circumference is probably about maybe 70 centimeters, I'd say, maybe less. And so the main sort of stick, the stem of the plant, goes from the soil, and it's thicker at the bottom, and the plants are bigger at the bottom. And as you go up with your eyes, you look up, it starts to get thinner, and the leaves start to get smaller progressively, but they're still the same shape even though they're smaller. I would estimate that the height of the plant, I can't really see the roots, but I'm gonna take that. Let's take that 30 centimeters of the plant pot into consideration here. Let's add that, and so from the floor until the highest point of the plant is going to be, well, it's at least 1 meter, at least, I would say, and I would estimate it's less than 2 meters. I would say. Well, it's definitely less than 2 meters. Yeah, it's definitely less than 2 meters, because it's not as high as a person, but it's definitely bigger than 1 meter. And okay, so that's the plant. Next to the plant, there's a second plant. Well, there are two other plants next to the bigger plant that I've just described, and I'll now describe those. So there's a smaller one that's kind of closer to me. I'm sitting this side of the room and it's closer to me. And it's kind of, yeah, I mean, it's like in front, but to the side of this plant. So it's blocking approximately kind of, I don't know, 20 centimeters squared of the plant part of the big plant from view. This plant, the mud, the soil is kind of poking out the top. It's so full. I think it's possible that the roots maybe are pushing it up, and it maybe needs to be put into a bigger pot maybe. But the plant pot is quite stylish, elegant. It's a white ceramic, but it really is kind of sort of like stylish. It's very, it looks like very clean, and kind of like the way the light catches on it is very nice. It looks very clean and not exactly shiny or glittery per se. No, it's more elegant than that. It's more kind of understated. And I think like one of the really nice features about this plant pot is it has three like little legs on the bottom that kind of mean that the actual base, the flat surface on the bottom of the plant pot is not touching the floor. It's elevated, it's raised on these feet. They look like maybe bronze, maybe that kind of color, bronze, kind of brass color. And I think it's a really nice design feature. And now let's get onto the plant itself. It's much smaller than the bigger plant that I described previously. I would say it's not even 30 centimeters. Maybe it's like 25 centimeters. This is the kind of main stem, the big stick, and it's got like rings basically of like slightly different colors. The main color is kind of like beige, sort of like white almost, but like beige, but it has these rings that kind of interrupt that kind of whiter color every once in a while with a darker kind of brown. But that's not as pronounced as the white color, which is predominant. And the leaves are long and thin. The leaves are long and thin, and they kind of droop. They go up at first. So like from when they start, and they all come out of the top part of the stem. So there aren't any leaves like up on the sides of the stem. Like with the original plant I described, the leaves will come out of the stem at kind of regular intervals. If you look at that plant and follow it up from the bottom, like there's a leaf, and then if there's a gap, and then there's a leaf, and then there's a gap, and then there's a leaf. And in this one, the smaller one that I've just begun describing, all of the leaves come out of the top basically. And could it be that there's actually two stems? Yeah, I think I didn't see that. It's interesting because one of the leaves from the top was actually blocking this view, but what you have is quite interesting. It's it's like you have a kind of like a main stem, and then it splits into two, and it looks a little bit like then a tuning fork basically. That I don't know if you've seen those. Like it's basically a fork with two prongs. And those prongs go up, and it's kind of where it splits is kind of just slightly above halfway of the entire size of the plant. So if it's 25 centimeters tall, you're talking about half of that would be 12.5 centimeters. It's probably about on the 12.5 centimeters mark where it splits, and so then at the top, like, this is the only place where the leaves come from, but they come from the top of each one of these so-called prongs, if we think about it as a tuning fork. And then you have these, and it kind of looks like the character Slideshow Bob from The Simpsons, Krusty the Clown's sidekick, basically the guy, and he goes to prison and stuff like that. But it looks a little bit like his hair. It's kind of going off in all different directions, and it's kind of like lots of different, like these leaves are long and thin and pointed at the end, and they initially when they come out of the kind of the main stem, they go up, and then about kind of, well, some of them are drooping, they're kind of drooping already, but some of them go high and then they start to droop, maybe about halfway along the length of that leaf. And I would say that the length of, or the average length of a leaf would be about, because at the moment they're kind of like curled, I would say, in a way, so it's not flat, so it's hard to say exactly how long the leaf is, but you estimate, if you flattened out one of the leaves, maybe the average length of that leaf, I would say, is maybe, I don't know, like maybe it's like 18 centimeters, I think. There's a couple of the leaves are a little bit yellow, but mainly it's a kind of a nice green color. So the original plant I described, the bigger plant, the color on those leaves is really dark green. It's a really dark green, and then the leaves on that one look very waxy, waxy green, dark green. And this one, the green is much lighter, more like grass, And in fact, these leaves kind of do look like blades of grass that have kind of elongated, maybe a bit thicker, and obviously not as close together as you normally find grass, Well, I think I've done a good job of describing that. And then, so just to describe the third plant, and they're kind of, I guess they make a sort of a triptych. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but like a kind of, 3 paintings next to each other, but they're plants. So what's quite nice about this one is that the plant pot is kind of, there are 2 plant pots basically. It sort of has, you can see just peeking out from at the top of the kind of the second, I'm going to call it the second plant pot, which is the one that's mostly visible. It's almost like there's you have a plant pot and then you put another plant pot inside it, kind of thing. So the one that's most visible is the original, is the second plant pot basically. So right, to describe it, yes, so basically, like, okay, you put the soil in the plant pot, that's plant pot 1, and then obviously the plant, and then so that's like normal, and then you put that plant pot inside a second plant pot. So let's call the second plant pot the one that would, if you can imagine, be more visible. Basically, we can see that one more. So poking out from the top of the second plant pot is the first plant pot, but you can only see a little bit of it because most of it's covered by the second plant pot. And it's a kind of, is it sort of like a kind of grey with like a little bit of red, a reddish grey maybe color, and you get the sense that it's I think it's like a kind of, I don't know if it's stone or what the material is. I don't think it's plastic though. So anyway, you don't see much of that one, and so the one you do see is I tell you, like it makes quite a nice effect. It makes like a, because that second plant pot has a kind of a white part basically on the top. It's not in halves. It's kind of like, I would say maybe 1/4 of that second plant pot is white at the top, and then the other 3/4 is more like a wicker color, like a kind of almost like the color of wheat maybe, but yeah, like a kind of light wicker, like a pine color, like. And that's nice because if you look at the other two plant pots, one of them's white and one of them's wicker with a similar color, and this one, the third one, just really goes well together with it. And then I think what's quite good is by being able to see the plant pot one, the first plant pot, and it's kind of reddish grey color, you can see, you get like you get something a bit new, basically. And then just to describe this plant, you can't see how much soil's in it. You have basically kind of like, they almost look like swords, like sharp kind of like sword like leaves. They have a sharp point at the end. They've got quite a thick, wide, flat body. It's like some of them curve a little bit, some of them a bit more straight, but they don't curve much when they do. And they have a nice like green color that's like dappled with different shades of green. It's like really nice. It's like a kind of darker green, and then like with spots almost of a lighter green. And then on the edges, it's yellow basically. It's like a light yellow color, like all along the edge, almost like if it was a sword, the edge of the blade is yellow, And I think and this one I should say is approximately the same height as the second plant I described. We're talking about, I think it's, I think it's maybe again like 25 centimeters in height, but not including like the bit that touches, not including the plant pot. So yeah, if you include the plant pot, it's definitely 30 centimeters. I think maybe I overestimated the original plant pot's height. Now I'm looking at it, I'm thinking maybe it's the big plant. I'm not sure its plant pot is actually 30 centimeters. I think I might have estimated that wrong. It might be more like 20 centimeters, and then these plants are more like maybe 30 or 40 from the floor to the top. I'm not sure. Well, anyway, they're not, anyway. So I think that's that part of the room. That's sort of that's in the corner. That's in the corner of this room. Well, there's just too much really. I don't think we can fit it all in. Well, anyway, in that corner then, to just describe, there is a plug socket. There's a plug, a black plug that's connected there, and there are 3 plugs, and they're in a kind of a vertical arrangement, and they kind of like arranged like traffic lights, and they're just, they're not right near the floor, but they're kind of close to the floor. They're well done. It's sort of like a rectangle. And then you can't really see the bottom plug because there's a guitar there in front. So there's a guitar and a guitar stand. The guitar stand is kind of black. Well, it is black, and it has 3 legs. The two like foremost legs, the 2 legs that are kind of at what I would say is the front of the guitar stand, they are longer, much longer, and they kind of end it with on their ends they have, well, I can only see one because the other one is kind of obscured, but I can see one, and I can assume that the other one's the same, is that they have a kind of rubber cover over the end, and they're basically black cylinders, I think made of metal, and they're long. They're much longer than the third backward kind of the behind little foot. So it's got like 3 feet on the bottom to keep it stable, and the third one is much shorter than the other 2, but also is the same. It's a cylinder. It's made of metal. It's black, and it I think it's made of metal, and it finishes with one of these rubber kind of grips or sort of protect it. I don't know what it's for. It's like for stability, I guess. It makes it less likely to move. and that's at the bottom. And so in terms of like, I think if you were looking at it from above, it would kind of, in terms of the angles, you've more or less got something like the peace symbol, you know, where you've kind of got the two, you know, three lines basically, like dividing up a circle like that. Kind of that in terms of angles. So I don't know, in between each line, it's more or less, well, between two of them, it's like, it's kind of what, like a kind of 110 degrees, 120 degrees maybe, and then 120 plus 120 is 240, and then to make up the 360 it's another 120. Is it right like that, or are a couple of them like 140, 140 degrees, and then that's 280, and then it's kind of 80. Maybe it's something like that, like, or maybe it's like 80 and 80 between the little foot, and each long foot is maybe is more like, maybe it's more like 100 degrees each, and then the other one is 160, like between the two long ones. It feels like basically the angle, there's quite a wide angle between the two long feet, and I think that helps give it stability somehow. The guitar is kind of, it's got a kind of, I don't know, like, it got a reflective quality to the front of it. I don't know what the material is. I guess if it's a guitar, it's made of wood, but it looks quite well polished. It reflects the light a little bit, but it's a kind of greeny gray, like very, like not obviously green, not like the plants, but maybe teal, I don't know. And then there's a kind of edge to it that's like a light brown color, and it's very thin line that just kind of is there, where it connects the kind of the edge of the guitar to the side kind of thing. If it was like a cube shape, then it would be like, you know, the edge, one face, and then an edge, and then the other face, you know, at a 90 degree kind of thing. So it's almost like that at a 90 degree, but it's curved, you know. So, and then you have a kind of, so there's a, so basically the shape, then the line of the guitar, like of its left side, is kind of like a little bit like, it's hard to say. It's kind of like a snake. It's a wave. It's kind of like a wave, a little bit like, yeah, I don't know. It looks a bit like a kind of cobra, almost like, you know, when a cobra stands up on its, not stands up obviously, but it's kind of, it's like, it's up, you know. It's kind of a little bit like that. There's like curves and waves in it. It's, so then you can see there's a strap. Well, so the guitar has basically, so you have the neck of the guitar that goes up, and then on each side of that neck you have two little kind of like arms, almost like really mini like arms. They're not long. They're not really long. Like almost like little shoulders. Maybe is a better thing to say. But they're kind of, they're facing up a little bit like. Almost like imagine you had a fork, but the prongs are really short and they're stubby. It's almost like that. But, and so the thing is as well, that like you have one of these like little stubby shoulder things on each side of the guitar's neck, where all the strings are. And basically one of them is slightly longer than the other one. So it's not symmetrical. It is not symmetrical. It's asymmetrical. And so on the slightly longer stubby shoulder, which is on the left side of the guitar from my perspective, there is a guitar strap that you would use, I suppose, to put it around your neck. And you can see it's black. And there's a kind of leather part at the top that fastens onto the kind of, well, the top of that stubby little thing. And then there's on the strap is like loads of slices of pizza. and then on a black background, and it twists down to the bottom, and then there are kind of these kind of rectangular things, two rectangular things that are beige, and they basically, you can see there are lots of screws in those, and it's almost like a rectangle, and then in the center of the rectangle you've got then two, like, so there are two of these rectangular things, and in the middle of the rectangle of each of these rectangles there are two kind of elongated ovals that I think might be plastic, and one of them is exactly the same color as the kind of this rectangle that basically makes a border around these two things, and one of them is the same color as the rectangular border, but one of them is black, and they have like these screws in the middle of them, and yeah, so I think it creates quite a nice effect, because what you have then is like there's one of these rectangular things right at the base of the neck of the guitar, and then there's one a little bit further down, and if we go, imagining these elongated oval things, if we go from the top and work our ways down, it goes kind of beige, black, and then going over to the next rectangle that's below, black, beige. So you have like almost like a nice, there is a symmetry there, and it's like they're kind of mirroring each other in terms of color, and I think it's a nice effect. And then below the lower rectangle with the two elongated ovals in the middle, you have got like kind of like some sort of, it's like a metal, like looks quite solid metal. I don't know if it's like steel or iron, or I don't know what kind of metal it is. And that looks to be like quite an important like mechanism for the guitar, and it's really, I think you can see that the guitar strings are kind of coming out of that place at the bottom of the guitar, and it almost looks like a kind of like a little organ, like you would have in a church, like, but really really miniature. And then there's kind of, and then to the side there's like a hole, like as part of the mechanism there's one bit on the side that there's just a hole there, so I don't know if it's missing something. So like working our way up now to the neck of the guitar, which is where like all the strings kind of go across and then go up to what I'm calling the head of the guitar. Well, there's so much to describe. You have these horizontal lines that, so first of all, the length of this neck is about, I'm estimating about, I don't know, 70 centimeters. I don't know, is that a bad estimate? Maybe it's I don't know. So I'm going to estimate 70 to 80 centimeters. And it's a dark, very dark brown color, and I'm assuming it's made of wood. It's a very dark brown color, and it is not quite a rectangle, but it's basically a rectangular shape, but it kind of, and not much, but it just slightly gets, it slightly tapers towards the head at the higher part of the guitar. So this is slightly wider, like towards where the higher beige rectangle is with the two elongated ovals in it. It's at its thickest, widest part, and then the higher up you go, it seems to just slightly, not by much at all, but just slightly taper, gets just slightly narrower, the neck. And then so it's that color. It's a dark brown color. I think it's like a dark wood. Maybe it's an oak or something like that. I don't know much about wood. And what you have is like, basically at various intervals you have like a kind of a little metal stripe, basically, and I think that's to kind of separate what are called frets, basically. And way down at the lower part of this neck, right where near that rectangle that has the two elongated ovals in it, the upper one of that, right near there, that these metal stripes, they come at kind of intervals. So they come, and then there's a gap, and then there's another one, and then there's a gap, and there's another one, and then there's a gap, and then there's another one, as you work your eye from the bottom up to the top of that neck. And what's interesting is that the intervals, the gap between each of these like metal stripes is very, very small the lower down you get. And as you move your eye up the neck, the distance between the metal stripes, there's one, two, between the metal stripes, it increases, it gets higher. So that there's more distance than the higher up the neck you get between any two metal stripes than there is lower down the neck. If you can imagine kind of like an accordion, I guess it's the leather part. I don't know if it's leather they make with the accordion, but when you extend the accordion, you can see those kind of ridges of each part of that leathery, the material thing. If you imagine like you've fully extended it and you're pushing it back to its closed position, probably you would see a similar effect of like maybe the distances between the two of the ridges is longer, maybe towards the part of the accordion that you're holding with your hand, and as you get closer towards the middle, the distance between the ridges is going to be shorter, and it's sort of like that same effect. And then, so one final detail about just the neck itself, there's also, well, of course you've got strings on the neck, but they're not like on the neck there. You can tell they're kind of hovering just slightly above. But what you have is you've got these little circles in the center, right in the center of the neck. You have these little circles basically, and then they're not like, there doesn't seem to be like such a pattern, although there kind of is. You've got like nothing, so that they're in between where the two metal stripes are basically. So you've got metal stripe, gap, which is wood, then a metal stripe, then you've got wood, but then in the middle of that wood you have got a circle, and it's kind of like, it's almost like a pearl. It looks like a pearl. It's like kind of like a very light silvery color. It looks quite nice, and it's right in the center, like halfway between the two edges of the neck from left to right. And so what's interesting is you've got these little circles, and then metal stripe, then there's just a gap, there's nothing, then metal stripe, then there's one of these little circles again, then there's a metal stripe, then there's a gap, just the wood, then there's a metal stripe, then there's the wood but with one of these circles on again, then there's the metal stripe, then there's a wood, no circle, metal stripe, and then what's interesting now is there's wood, no circle, then there's a metal stripe, and then this one's really interesting because on this one there are now two circles on either, like, and they are kind of, they're not like right next to each other in the middle, they are like, you can tell just like equidistant from one another. They're kind of, if you imagine a cyclops, if you imagine all of the circles that I've described so far, they are like a cyclops, and a cyclops has their eye right in the center of their head, in their forehead, yeah. And then now this one we're talking about now, this section of the guitar neck, this one is like a normal person with two eyes. It's like they're split, on their face in a kind of symmetrical way, but not right in the middle. And there's two now. This is a key thing. There are two of these circles. So that's the only time that occurs on the bridge, not the bridge, the neck of the guitar. And then you have on these metal stripes, then it's an empty section, blank, no circle, then a metal stripe, then blank, no circle, then a metal stripe, then there's a circle, metal stripe, blank, metal stripe, 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 blank. And that's where the kind of what I'm calling like the neck of the guitar sort of ends. And so it's interesting when you look at it, take it in as a whole, is that you've got a pattern. If you work your eyes from the bottom of the neck up to the top of the neck, you have a pattern where it's going empty, empty, circle, empty, circle, empty, circle, empty, circle, empty, empty, double circle, unique, empty, empty, circle, empty, circle, empty, circle, empty, circle, empty, empty. So it at the point where there are two circles, it kind of, that acts as a line of symmetry in terms of the pattern. And so it's almost like 0 0 1 0 1 0 1 0 1 0 0 2 0 0 1 0 1 0 1 0 1 0 0. So I don't know if I'm explaining this right, but it kind of it's like the same pattern again, repeated, but going in the opposite direction. A little bit like how a timeline works with regards to like AD and BC, where as you go towards 0 from BC, the numbers get smaller, and then when you're traveling away into AD, the numbers get bigger, and it's a bit like that sort of thing. And that middle section where there are two circles which are like eyes, then that's kind of like year 0 basically. And then at the top of the guitar, you have got some writing, which I can't quite make out, but well, I can, but I don't know if I'll say it because I don't know, just worried that somebody's gonna steal it. So I mean, it's not actually that expensive. So, but all right, screw it. It's a PRS SE. It's not a great guitar, So I don't know why I'm worried about that, but I love it. So I guess now I'm putting too much of myself into this now. So I'll just carry on. I'll just focus on what I'm here to do, which is to describe this. So it's an SE, and you can see the word SE, and you can see, well, I know it says PRS, but you can't quite see that very clearly. And it says something else after the SE, and I think from memory, does it say something, or is that just a mark? I'm not sure. I think it does. I think it says maybe custom. I think it might be an SE custom, but I can't tell. Anyway, this is where the kind of the other end, so the strings of the guitar start in that kind of metal mechanism that I described earlier, where there was a kind of hole to the side. It's metal at the bottom, and that's at the bottom, and then at the top, this is where the strings kind of end as their journeys come to an end, and they end at kind of like 6 metal circular things that they kind of, I don't know, they're like almost like kind of like old school switches, like the kind of switch you would find when you're learning about like electricity circuits at school, and they give you like stuff to mess around with, kind of like a toggle switch, you know what I mean? They kind of look like that, but they're all the same, like totally every part of this circular kind of mechanism. Is it a mechanism? It's more like a part. Is kind of the same color, and it's metal, whatever metal is, and each string ends at one of these points, and there are 6 of these points because there are 6 strings, and they are, if you could do a line of symmetry, and they would be symmetrical, 3 on one side, 3 on the other side, and they're kind of more or less equidistant from each other, but I'd say, so starting at the bottom, so if I just look at the left-hand side, I'm just looking at the 3 on the left, you've got a kind of, it's not kind of 90 degrees, it's not perpendicular to the floor, they're kind of slightly at an angle going up, so that they are kind of like if it's like perpendicular, they're slightly more than perpendicular, but not much more. So we're talking about maybe like 100 degrees, maybe less, maybe 95 degrees. And then with that kind of degree angle, you move up and you put the next one, and then you put the next one, and they're kind of in a straight line like that. But it feels like it might, if you were to draw a line connecting these three kind of like points, it would be slightly curved, maybe slightly curved. And the distance between each one of these points is more or less the same distance. Although I think, so you've got three of them: the lower one, the middle one, and the top one. I think the distance between the middle one and the top one is slightly longer than the distance between the bottom one and the middle one. And then if you look over on the right hand side of the same, you have a mirror image of that basically, which is exactly the same phenomenon, just on the other side. And then, but they're these, and so and because of this, it's kind of like I described, like the kind of 95 degrees as kind of like more than perpendicular arrangement. What you have then is that like the top, so taking now all six into consideration, the top two are in a kind of horizontal line together, you know, they're on the same sort of like plane, I guess, and they're on a line together, and they are like, the distance between those two is quite short, maybe 1 centimeter. And then as you go down to the next two, so the next two in the kind of middle line, they're in a kind of horizontal line together. The distance between those two is now bigger. It's like maybe 2 centimeters. And then finally the bottom two of these parts, these circular parts where the strings end, that's maybe 3, maybe even 4 centimeters apart. They're now wider. So you have this kind of, in the same way that maybe like a church tower, like a spire, or like the top part kind of like peaks in you know, goes into a peak, and it's a bit like that. It kind of, towards the top, it gets, the two higher points get closer together. I don't know if that makes sense. Anyway, at the very, very top, so the actual kind of what I'm going to call the head of the guitar, this has two really nice curved lines on either side, and it's not symmetrical in total, but at the bottom part it kind of is, and they curve off to the side, almost like I don't know if it's a sin curve or a cos curve or a tan or whatever, but it's like one of those ones, and it's just a kind of, almost like a, I don't know, just a kind of, not straight, like a curved, slightly curved line that you would see on a graph, basically. If you plotted a graph, it's going to be hard to explain. It's like, if you plotted a graph and like you did, on the bottom, time was the axis, on the x-axis was time, and the top axis going up was like number of cakes sold, imagine. So at first it would be like on the like over the course of and it's like from 0 to like, let's say 14, like 2 weeks, but it's like done per day. So each point of the graph along the x-axis is like 1 day, day 1, day 2, day 3, etc. Then what you're going to find with trying to describe this curve is that like, it's, you know, the first day it goes from kind of like 0 cakes sold to like you know, like 10 cakes sold, like it's high, imagine. And then the next day, similar, maybe it's 9, it's still like a lot. So basically the curve's going up like quite a lot, and then it starts to slowly, maybe you do it like in terms of total cakes sold. So, you know, then it's 10, then it's 19, so it shoots up quickly, and then it slowly curves up, but it's still going up. So it's kind of like you have, you know, 10, then it's 20, then it's 29, then it's 38, then it's kind of 40, then it's 46, no, 30, well, not 38 to 40, that was too small of a jump in the middle. But I think you kind of understand what I'm saying, is that it's like, you get a lot, like a big, like a lot of sales at the start, and then it curves off, but it's still going up, and that's the kind of curve shape at the bottom part of each side, the left side and the right side of the head of the guitar. And those are symmetrical, those curves to one another at the bottom part. And so they kind of end in a point, and then it's quite an elegant design in my opinion. It sort of like goes up now, back on itself, because those curves take the line of the thing like out to the sides basically. Then they kind of stop at a point, and then they kind of come back on each other in a gentler curve, like going up then to the kind of the top part of the head. And it's quite difficult to describe, but it almost looks like the hull of a ship. When you turn your head 90 degrees to the left, it's almost like you're looking at the way a ship, like a ship, that curve, this top, this upper, this is now, I'm now talking about the curve of the top part of the head of the guitar. It looks a bit like a ship basically, and kind of what you've got then is these tuning keys, which they look like sails on this ship basically, and you've got 3 of them on each side, so it's like a sailing ship with 3 sails. But so to describe these tuning keys a bit, or like whatever, tuning keys, I don't know, I can't remember if that's the right term, but whatever, these 3, they're basically, they're made out of metal, and they look like they look like sails in the sense of that big analogy of, oh, it looks like a sailing ship, but really, like, if you were to really kind of, I don't think it gives it a fair representation. They more look like kind of like a kind of like Stone Age hammer tool kind of thing, but made out of like metal, and it's like grey, like shiny kind of shiny, like silvery metal. And so they're kind of they look like kind of circular style, kind of like rocks maybe, and then there's a little cylinder, looks like, but like from my perspective it could just be a rectangular shape, like a cuboid, but you can't really tell, but I think it's a cylinder, and it basically connects this kind of more like chunkier stone part to the actual head. Almost like, okay, going back to the analogy of the ship, these are like the masts, and then they're quite small. They're probably they're probably not even 1 centimeter in length, and they're probably the area of the kind of the bigger chunkier metal part that I said was like a Stone Age like tool almost. What is that? It's probably, surface area is going to be something like 2 centimeters squared, maybe 3. I don't know. It's hard to say. And then basically on the other side you have the same, but it's slightly obscured from my view just because the angle of it. I can still see them, but I can't see the mast parts of those ones. I can just see the Stone Age tooly parts, and in fact for the lower one of the 3, I can barely see it at all. It's just poking out a little bit, and it's been twisted, so I can only see it looks thin. I don't get the full sort of like Stone Age tool experience from that one. It kind of looks, you can't really see, it's just like a tiny little metal thing that's thin really, but that's just because the way it's twisted, it's facing me so that it's not flat basically. It doesn't look like flat on. It's, imagine you had a drum. Imagine you had a drum. Okay, if I turn the drum so the skin is facing you, you can see it looks like a big circle. But so it's facing you. If I then rotate that drum 90 degrees towards you in your kind of direction, then you're going to see the profile side of the drum, and so it's not going to appear to you to be circular. So that's the same thing that's happening here with the perspective I've got on the guitar. And we're coming to the end of it now, and so the last thing I just want to describe is the top part of the guitar head. Is that from my perspective, the left hand side of it, it peaks it peaks and it's slightly higher than the right hand side of it, which is interesting because it kind of mirrors what happens lower down the guitar with those two things I described earlier as kind of like stumpy shoulders. And that could, I don't know if you remember, on the left hand side, the stumpy, from my perspective, the stumpy shoulder was slightly longer and higher than the one on the right, and that is then replicated again in a much smaller scale and not in exactly the same shape, but kind of like a similar, but not exactly the same. But it's replicated then at the top of the head, where you kind of have, it almost looks a little bit like the Nike tick, where you kind of have like a high on the left hand side. It kind of starts and it curves down, and then right at the end like flicks up, but it's high point at the end where it curves down and flicks up. That flicking up is not as high as where that curved line began when you started it on the left hand side. And I think, and then the last thing to say is that about halfway up the neck, there is a mechanism that is connected to the guitar stand that is supporting the neck of the guitar and keeping it there, for stopping it from falling. And what it is again, it's kind of, I think we had this earlier, but it's like a two-pronged fork really, and each of those prongs is coming out either side of the guitar towards me, and is kind of a symmetrical thing, a little bit like a horseshoe, basically a horseshoe facing towards me. That's if you can imagine holding the guitar neck, like the guitar neck's resting in the kind of the middle part of that horseshoe. And then there's a kind of little black it's a fastening thing that that's kind of like fastened across from one end of this horseshoe to the other end of this horseshoe, and it's flat from my perspective, and it's kind of connected, and there's like, I don't know if it's like a kind of black rubbery material, and there's a little gap in it, so it's almost like a kind of not netting, but it's like, because there's only two, again, it's sort of like a two-pronged thing, a little bit like almost like a kind of a crayfish or a lobster a little bit, where like the part on the right is solid, and that's almost like the lobster's body, and then the part on the left there's this gap between these two prongs, and that's kind of like the bit where, if you imagine a crayfish, the part in front of the crayfish's face, where it's sort of like empty, but it has then two arms on either side, and so it's a little bit like that, but they're not chunky like the claws of a crayfish, and they're thinner. And then you can see there's a kind of, again, this kind of like cylindrical, like metal black tube made of the same material that the feet are made of, and that curves down, going down, almost like the stem of the big plant that we started the episode describing, just goes down towards the floor. So it's interesting that like we have something that's man-made and next to something that's natural, and the shapes are similar. So something interesting there maybe. And then just at the bottom you can see, and I didn't describe it before, but you can see there's just a little kind of similar kind of metal cylinder that is that's kind of holding on to the bottom of the guitar, the right at the bottom of the guitar, the chunkier part of the body, and it's just keeping it there from falling. I think there's a few other things I could have sort of mentioned, but from my perspective, that's mainly what I could see. I've described 3 plants, and I've described the plug socket. I didn't go into much detail with that, I perhaps could have done. And I've described the guitar, and that's kind of that section of the room in that kind of bottom corner. And there is more stuff, there's kind of, but I think for now that's all I have today. I'm a bit tired. I think I've done an okay job of describing this part of the room, and I hope that you will like come and listen and watch again to hear a different part of the room being described, and perhaps in the future maybe a different room. So that was the first episode of Andy Casper describes a room. Or maybe I'll call it Andy describes a room. Anyway, thank you so much for watching this. I hope you really enjoyed it.